Власть, сформированная Евромайданом, с каждым днем становится все большей смертельной
The political
угрозой
power
как для
formed by the
государства
Euromaidan
Украина,
is
так и
becoming
для
more
нашего
lethal
народа.
and fatal for both
это
Ukraine
ощущают
as a
все.
state and the people
В
residing
большей
in the
степени
country
или в меньшей,
day by
прямо или
day.
косвенно
This threat
ощущают
has become
все.
tangible to everybody in a varying
Если
degree,
власть
expressly or
возглавляет
by
суверенное
invocation.
государство,
Any national
она
government must
обязана,
exercise the international
выполняя
law
нормы
rules
и
as well as the
международного
rules of the
права,
domestic
и внутреннего
legislation.
законодательства,
It also must see to the
заботиться
country's
о
prosperity,
том, чтобы
to the citizens living
государство
properly in the
процветало,
state.
чтобы люди
By
могли
one's living
жить
properly
в
in
этом
one's country, I
государстве.
mean one should
А
be
жить
entitled
это
to work,
значит
to
работать,
eat well,
это
to be
значит
treated
питаться
effectively,
нормально, это значит
to give birth to
лечиться,
offspring,
это
and
значит
not to be
рожать детей, не
concerned
бояться
about the
за их
future.
безопасность.
Unfortunately, the current
Но
Ukrainian government hasn't demonstrated
ничего этого
either
мы
of
не
the things I
видим со
have mentioned
стороны
above.
власти Украины.
A political crisis in Ukraine is being triggered off
Сейчас
now,
политический
and the
кризис.
pro-governmental media point out that it allegedly occurred out of the blue. In particular, they underline the political news. Oh, the parliament coalition is about to collapse. They are unable to decide on the prime minister candidacy. Shame on you. It is a predictable, consistent development of the political crisis. Everything is falling apart. The political power, national economy, social sphere. These implications are not accidental, but are a product of the political cause being implemented by the government.
В общем-то, я об этом говорила с самого начала, когда Украину втянули в Международный валютный фонд 3 июня 1992 года. Я предупреждала, что Международный валютный фонд выдавит всю кровь из Украины, все жилы вытянет, а потом как тряпку ненужную, слабую, с нищим населением.
Actually, I warned against such adverse effects right in the very beginning, when Ukraine was drawn in the IMF's snare on June 6, 1992. I warned you that, having sucked the lifeblood out of the country, the fund would throw away Ukraine along with its poor population like a floor cloth. I also said then that they would act for the benefit of the Department of State, the USA being the only beneficiary. It is the foreign and domestic policy causes imposed from outside and the current political system which regularly lead to the continuous and constantly worsening crisis and eventually to a national calamity. By the way, you may remember that in October 1995, from the Parliament tribune, I offered our people a saving economic program in order to prevent from a national catastrophe. That was the final of the package of proposals I, along with my colleagues, had worked out.
И ситуация на Украине ухудшалась с момента развала Советского Союза. Это не сегодня появилось. Достаточно назвать одну цифру. В 90-м году половина населения Украины работала, была занята в общественном производстве.
The situation in the country began to worsen since the collapse of the USSR. In other words, what we have now hasn't been triggered off today. To back up this conclusion, I would like to refer to some statistics. In 1990, half of the whole population of the country were engaged in social production. The unemployment rate was equal to zero. Among 52 million of the residents living in the Republic at that time, 25.4 million aged from 50 to 60 years old were involved in some kind of public work. What is the situation like nowadays? Well, first of all, the number of the population has decreased dramatically. After Ukraine lost the Crimea because of the domestic course implemented by the government, the number accounts for 42 million, and people's involvement in public work has fallen 3 times, not exceeding 9 million. The experts state that the number of the Ukrainian unemployed stands at 2 million. Among the youth, the unemployment rate amounts to 20%. It means that every 5th young person who is about to start their new independent life, to start a family, to bear children, and provide their households with all necessary things, can hardly do that, for they are unemployed. That's why the population of the country is dying out, Ukraine having gained the lead in mortality rate terms. That is why thousands of Ukrainian youth who could stay and work fruitfully augmenting the national wealth are leaving the country. But all of these trends began a long time ago, right after the collapse of the Soviet Union. But the events that last 2 years have seen are like the sword of Damocles, which is going to behead Ukraine because the latter was drawn into an agreement with the IMF.
Ведь вы знаете, Азаров и Янукович остановились в 2013 году у опасной черты только потому, что им, наконец, удалось услышать голос профессионалов, производственников, специалистов, экономистов, которые сказали, если Украина потеряет еще и внешнюю...
You know, both Azarov and Yanukovych came to the verge over which, had they crossed it in 2013, the country would have been in for a poor time. Those two didn't turn a deaf ear to the professionals, manufacturers who underscored the following. In case Ukraine has lost its foreign market and begins to be under the US protectorate, it will stop existing as a subject of international law. You may remember the conference of Ukrainian manufacturers held in October 2013, where they voiced their common opinion on the matter, emphasizing the inadmissibility of signing that agreement. But what about the neo-Nazis, the non-governmental organizations which were behind the coup? The USA didn't want to change anything about the initial plans. The coup took place, the Ukraine EU association agreement has been ratified. Its political part was the first to be ratified. And what is the result? Ukraine has lost its state sovereignty due to the policy conducted by some super-state structures, such as the Trade Committee, which determines what production and in what quantities should be produced in Ukraine. No wonder why quotas on products manufactured in Ukraine and supposed to be sold in the European market are so small. They are so miserable because these quotas have been regulated by the Trade Committee, because Europe needs nothing manufactured in Ukraine. As for processing industry products, for example, engineering industry and light industry articles, the European Union doesn't need any of these products at all. They meet the needs in such production due to their own producing capacity.
Посмотрите на статистику внешней торговли до государственного переворота. Что Украина поставляла на внешний рынок стран СНГ и что на европейский. 60% экспорта в Россию, Белоруссию, страны СНГ – это была продукция передела. Прежде всего машиностроение. Работали на Украине отрасли ракетостроения, самолетостроения, автомобилестроения, судостроения, тепловозостроения. А Европе тогда уже все было видно, все было понятно. 20% всего экспорта, а сам экспорт был в 4 раза меньше по объему. 20% всего продукции передела, остальное продукция сырье, сельхозпродукция.
At this point, I would like to dwell on some statistics referring to the pre-coup period. Let's compare what Ukraine provided the European market with and what it supplied the CIS market with. According to the data, Ukraine provided Russia as well as the other countries from the CIS with nearly 60% of its engineering industry production, including rockets, aircraft, automobiles, sea vessels, trains, etc. As for the European market, that figure accounted for only 20%. The rest fell at raw materials. That is why Ukrainians' future was quite clear after the coup and the Ukrainian EU Association Agreement ratification. I'm bringing out these figures, which will barely ever released in the national periodical press, because they reveal awful truth. The 2013 and 2015 industrial output in US dollars. To get the picture, one should take in consideration the difference in the national currency rate to the US dollars and national currency depreciation, which brought down its value 3.5 times. The Ukrainian industrial production was assessed as much as 38 billion US dollars, the national currency exchange rate being equal to 8 hryvnias in 2013. 2 years later, the figure amounted to 208 billion hryvnias, but the exchange currency rate being at 23 hryvnias. The 2015 exchange rate made the sum equal to just 9 billion. The fall was drastic, being 4.5 times. That means budget reduction on such social expense items as salaries, pensions, social benefits, road reparation, recreation centers, etc.
Если убивать собственное производство, откуда будут средства? В 4,2 раза. Упало все. Объемы экспорта, объемы импорта, объемы или доли, лучше сказать, отечественного производства в импорте. О какой самостоятельности, суверенности можно говорить Украине?
If the national production is being destroyed, the money to fill the budget will not be found. The volume of exports, imports, the share of domestic industry in the import have dropped significantly. Any mention of Ukraine's independence is groundless, because in 2015 the import product percentage in the pattern of consumption was pretty high. In the light industry it was as high as 98.4%. The figure in pharmaceutical industry was equal to 78.2%. In farming machine industry, 80%. Computer engineering, 93%. Tableware, 67%. Food commodities, oh my God, for the Ukraine, food commodities, 44%. The latter is of notorious quality. No wonder a great number of our people are dying. This is what they have done with the national economy.
Валовой продукт Украины за эти 2 года сократился на 17%. А если брать производство на душу населения в долларах, то с $4000 на человека в 2013 до $2000 на человека в 2015. И Украина скатилась на 134 место среди 180 стран мира, по которым ведется этот учет, на 134 место по производству валового продукта на душу населения. Нас уже Папуа-Новая Гвинея опережает. И это тогда, когда Украина всего лишь 25 лет назад входила в десятку ведущих стран мира по производству валового продукта на душу населения. То есть эти все 25 лет убивают, а за последние 2 года просто добивают. 3 миллиона рабочих мест потеряно только за последние 2 года. Почему? Потому что потеряны внешние рынки. Экспорт давал 60% в структуре валового продукта Украины, а внешние рынки потеряны. Вот что такое соглашение об ассоциации Украины с ЕС. И когда машут этой морковкой, знаете, для козы, морковкой безвизового режима. Вот, Евромайдан обещал, власть добьется безвизового режима в Европу. Для кого безвизовый режим? Для трудовых мигрантов, чтобы они могли без визы ломиться туда, в Польшу, Испанию, Италию, на любую грязную работу, заработать какую-то копейку? Так, увы, мигранты с Африки, с Ближнего Востока.
The Ukrainian gross product has dropped by 17% over the last 2 years. As for per capita production, the rate went down from $4,000 to $2,000. In terms of gross product per head, Ukraine has come down to 134th position among 180 countries. Even Papua New Guinea has passed ahead of us. The situation seems impossible in contrast to its having been one of the most technologically developed countries another 25 years ago. Over the past 25 years, the national economy has been done away with. Thus, 3 million of workplaces have been lost. Foreign markets have been lost as well. The export share in the Ukrainian gross product equaled 60%. The foreign markets have been lost. All these are the implications of the Ukraine-EU Association Agreement. Who needs the carrot in the form of visa-free entrance to the European Union? Numerous Ukrainian labor migrants to get paid peanuts for doing any untidy work? Another flop because refugees from Africa and the Middle East have already invaded Europe. So, nobody wastes Ukrainian migrant laborers. As for making a tour of Europe as tourists, it has become nearly impossible for people who don't have money to pay. The average salary in Ukraine in 2013 was $408.5. In 2015 it was $191.4. For the first 2 months of 2016, that figure stood at $172. Now the minimal pay is $52 per month. But in this case, Ukrainian pensioners should be considered rather poor because their pension is 41.6% of all the pensioners get such a pension. But the current government has a different outlook at the matter.
Я читаю в газете, открывая для себя просто Америку, что для властей Украины бедняки – это те люди, которые живут менее, чем на 75% среднего прожиточного минимума. Или 997 гривен в месяц. Вот только кто бедняки. И отсюда власть разрабатывает программу борьбы с бедностью, говорит, что к 2020 году станет вдвое меньше бедных. Статья так называется. Газета «Сегодня» за 4 марта. Это вообще бред, который может тиражироваться только в палате номер 6.
I have recently discovered America. For the government, it is people whose incomes are less than 75% of the average cost of living, which is equal to 997 hryvnias per month. Only such people can be classified as real paupers. On this basis, the national government is working out a war against property program. The national government is working out a war against poverty program. According to the program, they hope the number of the poor will have dropped twice by 2020. It is ravings. It is absurd to consider as the poor only those who get 75% of the minimum living cost. In other words, 1,330 hryvnias per month. Due to the high exchange rate at 26 hryvnias per dollar, the minimum living cost itself looks miserable, accounting for just over $50. It is less than $2 a day. The government is not aboard with the figures. Patrick sued the government for their having estimated such a low living cost, which didn't correspond to the actual cost of living. The court decision issued on September 17, 2015, the policy conducted by the Cabinet of Ministers was declared illegal. Although the Cabinet had appealed against the verdict, the appeal was finally dismissed by the appeal court. In other words, the appeal court recognized that the cabinet hadn't had the right to set such miserable rates into the 2016 budget. So what? The card is still up on the self-same spot. The cabinet hasn't done anything since the court decision was declared. Yatsenyuk is rubbing his hands gloatingly. Let Yaresko, Groisman, Poroshenko beat each other in the dog-eat-dog fashion. Let Poroshenko go back and forth, arranging the problems under Biden's supervision. Yatsenyuk thinks to himself, nobody will be able to replace me because America backs me up. It supports me because I'm conducting domestic policy targeted at killing Ukrainian people. Yatsenyuk does it with the help of miserable salaries and social benefits on the one hand, and with ever-rising prices and tariffs on the other hand.
Правительство заложило в бюджет 2016 года индексацию заработных плат и пенсий в этом году аж на 12,5%. Да цены возрастут минимум на 40. Вот в прошлом году на 49 возросли, и в этом году минимум на 40. Почему? Да потому что растут тарифы.
The government assigned a 20.5% adjustment for inflation in the 2016 budget, but the prices have risen up to 40%. Last year, the uplift in prices was as great as 49%, which in turn was brought about by the increase in the tariffs. Thus, according to one of the IMF requirements, the electricity tariff rate has increased by 25%, and it is one of the 5 steps of electricity tariff increase program. The program was launched in April 2015 and is supposed to be completed by March the 1st, 2017, ending up with a 3.5-time rise. I guess it is absolutely clear to everybody, if electricity tariff goes up, prices of all products will follow the trend automatically. And the 12.5% adjustment for inflation will hardly cover the prospective inflation. Since May 1st, the minimal salary has risen by 72 hryvnias, while the minimal pension has been up by 56 hryvnias. By having set such low payouts, they have slapped in people's faces. On some newspapers, they graph curves revealing the pensioners' welfare dynamics, which look quite rosy. However, this is bullshit. Ukrainian pensioners are being killed openly. Naturally, old men cannot leave the country to try their luck in another state. Neither can they survive in these dog-eat-dog social surroundings with such miserable pensions and sky-high products. As for the pensioners' welfare dynamics graph, printed in some periodical press, they are nothing but a disgrace. As I said earlier, they look alright because the rates tend to go up. But let us see what factors are behind the fake optimism. On the one hand, it is inflation. On the other hand, it is devaluation of the national currency. It goes without saying that the dynamics should inspire the hope that everything will be all right. What I am sure about is that if they had calculated and graphed the curves in terms of US dollars, the whole situation with pensioners living in Ukraine would hardly have been that bright. For instance, in 2013, the average pension stood at $183, but in 2015, that figure dropped dramatically, being equal to $63. But the problem is much more clearly seen in the product price curves related to the changes in prices of milk and some other odds and ends. To be more specific, in 2013, for the average pension, it was possible to purchase 210 liters of milk, but in 2015 that volume dropped twice. The neat figures in the 2 years were the mean figures in the two years were 26.9 and 19.2 kgs respectively. That's for meat. In order to do away with pensioners, a variety of dirty schemes, including fishy, alleged charity, have been set up. I simply opened my mouth when I came across and read an ad put up in a newspaper whose name I'm going to conceal. I strongly believe it must become a subject of the prosecutor's close attention, if still there is any honest one in the country. So, what do they suggest in their newspaper advertisement? It says the following: unfortunately, the government doesn't seem to provide you with all you need. On account of ever-rising prices of drugs and grocery ware, middle-aged people and pensioners have found it quite hard to live from hand to mouth. If you are alone, if there is nobody in your occupation to rely on, who will give you a helping hand? We will. We promise you to do the following things. Firstly, lump sum payment up to a few thousand of hryvnias. Secondly, besides your pension, a monthly financial support. Thirdly, footing their utility bills. Fourthly, good nursing on a regular basis committed by our employees. And finally, defense of your life. These conditions are offered to pensioners, most of whom possess an accommodation. After a pensioner has signed the documents on being on permanent alimony, he is likely to die out of the blue. There is no tripping them up. But because of the government's turning a blind eye on such swindlers, the number of pensioners living in Ukraine has been dropping rapidly. Because these shady dealers' schemes are allowed to be put up in national periodicals under the pretext of sky-high products in supermarkets, people become defenseless and are easily entrapped. The pretexts point to such high tariffs and prices. Excuse me, who is responsible for such prices? Those crooks? Hardly. All they do is just fishing in troubled waters. It is the government which is supposed to regulate the price-related questions. All problems in Ukraine can be solved by the government. They ought to take steps targeted at readjustment of the national economy, to provide employable population with workplaces, to secure a stable economic growth through a stable industrial output. If such measures were taken, the budget would certainly be filled with money. It is still possible to maintain order in all branches and a minimal salary which corresponds to the current economic reality. The labor force value in Ukraine is assessed at 7,000 hryvnias per month, which is supposed to be considered as the minimum pay. Besides, the minimum pension should be based on the labor force value as well. Pensions should go up in accordance with one's length of service and labor conditions. Provided that these measures have been taken, social justice can be maintained in the country.
О которых сейчас говорят все, потому что очень интересно. Доходы власть придержащих. Как богатеют первые лица? Кто заработал в кризис? Ну, во-первых, у президента, как Forbes утверждает, доходы за 2015 год у Порошенко увеличились на $100 миллионов. А дальше читаем.
At this point, I would like to refer to some figures being spoken much. They are related to the incomes of the powers that be. They reveal how fast top officials enrich themselves during the crisis. Thus, President's incomes have risen by $100 million within 2015. Oh my God. Yatsenuk's income increase was as much as $1,240,000 of US within the same period of time. Yaresko's bank account has risen by 8.8 million of hryvnias. Gondareva, the head of the National Bank, made a bundle which is as great as 29 million of hryvnias. Avakov, the top policeman of the whole country, doesn't fall out of the new-rich line because due to art sales, he became richer by 1.5 million of hryvnias. It looks like a detective story which should be dealt with by the Anti-Corruption Committee. Moreover, his spouse has earned $2,230,000 US. I wonder where they have got so many certificates allowing them to sell art pieces. Looks like they acted just the same as the Islamic State goons, selling black art dealers world-famous art pieces. Ivarus Abramovichus stands out against other local politicians because of the popular slogan, "Ukraine is only for Ukrainians." For some reasons, foreign managers are brought into the local ruling upper circles to manage us, residents of Ukraine. By leasing his real estate, he has been able to earn as much as 700,000 hryvnias per year. There is 8.6 million of US on his bank account, whereas his wife's incomes are as much as $7.5 million, having a 7.4 million per year salary. When I brought up the question concerning the average pay, I compared it with the mean temperature within a hospital complex. For example, an ordinary employee gets paid as much as 1.5 thousand of hryvnias, whereas another person, say the economic advancement minister's wife, is paid 7.4 million. In other words, 617,000 of hryvnias a month, or 25,000 of US dollars. Another person from the same cohort is Zagaida, the deputy of the Kyiv municipal head. Judging by the declaration he submitted, he doesn't look like an extremely rich person. However, his spouse is an owner of 29 flats, 8 estates, 6 plots of land, and 15 garages.
То есть, о чем это говорит? Что всем на Украине плохо? Да нет, конечно. На Украине плохо основной массе населения. Труженикам, пенсионерам, студентам из бедных семей. Вот кому плохо. А власть придержащим очень даже хорошо. Но они что, заботятся о процветании Украины? Да нет же. Причем это не только утверждение по социальным вопросам. Вот я взяла специально материал по Давосу. Ну, вы знаете, что в январе 2016 года, это обычная, уже традиционная, проводится сессия, это была в этом январе 2016 года 46-я сессия Всемирного экономического форума в Давосе. И вот к этому форуму выпускают специальный документ Global Competitiveness Report. И вот в этом отчете, в этом отчете 140 стран мира показано по рейтингам разных направлений. Итак, читаем. Украина. Рейтинг по надежности банков.
So, is everybody in a deplorable position in Ukraine? As we can see, no, not everybody. It is ordinary people such as students, pensioners, work people who suffer from the submarginal economic condition. As for the top politicians, they seem to be living high off the hog. And are they really worried about the welfare of Ukraine? Certainly they aren't. Now I would like to refer to some data published in a release of Global Competitiveness Report, which covers 140 countries, comparing them according to various criteria. Thus, in terms of bank dependability, Ukraine occupies the last position. In terms of securities market development, its position is 118. As for price affordability on the financial service market, its position is low again, being 123. As for stock market regulation effectiveness, Ukraine's position in the rating is 135. In terms of state apparatus effectiveness, it is 130. Taxing laws on business, 118. Whichever we take, the rate of Ukraine is rather low. Besides, a great offshore scandal has recently broken out. In order to transfer the Russian confectionery to the possession of the Rothschilds, the deal could be formalized through offshores. Not only the Ukrainian president, but also some other top executives use offshores. This is where the state's money is leaking to. Then Yaresko starts to tell us fairy tales about some positive changes. She also mentioned some kind of Ukrainian economic marvel, claiming that the national budget increased by 43% in 2015. Victor Skorchevsky, working for Forbes, has made a profound analysis. The quintessence of his review is the question he brings up. How could the budget have increased by 43% if all economic parameters fell sharply? Export, import, commodities, circulation.
А доходы бюджета выросли. Но сделав четкий экономический анализ, он четко показал, что за год, за 2015, эта власть увеличила налоги и сборы, новые налоги и сборы, на 42,3 миллиарда гривен. Повышение ставок налогов дало 20,6 миллиардов гривен в бюджет. Перечислено НБУ, то есть нашим национальным банкам, ну мы же понимаем, за счет чего перечислено, за счет эмиссии пустых денег и за счет облигаций государственного займа, 39 миллиардов гривен. НДС на импорт дал 31,5 миллиардов гривен, НДС на украинские товары 26,9. Итого 252 миллиарда гривен, 252. Или 39% всех доходов сводного бюджета в 2015 году были обеспечены
Over the
за
last
счет
year, the
инфляции,
government has created and
девальвации,
increased new
новых
taxes
налоговых
by
сборов,
42.3
повышения
billion
налоговых
of
ставок,
hryvnias, rate
разовых
increase
доходов
by
и эмиссий
20.6
дивидендов.
billion of hryvnias. For account of uncovered money emission and public bonds, the National Bank of Ukraine has transferred 39 billion hryvnias. Totally, in 2015, the consolidated budget had 252 billion hryvnias due to inflation, devaluation, new taxes and hryvnia emission. No economic miracle has occurred. Yaresko's budget increase in 2015, equal to 195 billion, is groundless. The correct figure should be amended up to 252 billion, which has been collected due to exclusively new taxes and merciless exploitation of us by the government. Does the current government really believe that they can keep to such a torturing economic, political, social course for good? Certainly they cannot. Ukraine is in for an economic collapse. Ukrainian banks will stop functioning. The national currency will collapse. Life in cities will come to a standstill. These are implications of the political games the current Ukrainian government is playing with the European Union. The order of the by saying this, I mean to say that regardless of which of the modern Ukrainian politicians takes over the Prime Minister's post, either Yuresko or Grossman, the situation is unlikely to change for better.
Нужно радикально менять курс внутренней и внешней политики. Безусловно, как нужно менять и политическую систему страны. Это же невозможно смотреть, когда власть узурпирована маленькой кучкой людей, а все остальные должны терпеть. И нацистская диктатура запугала людей настолько, что боятся поднять голос протеста в защиту своих жизненных прав. Посмотрите на Францию, сейчас на Францию. Что такое трудовой кодекс, который предложил Оланд? Трудовой закон. Как трудовая Франция вышла на улицы, требуя нормальных условий, оплаты труда, нормальных условий вообще работы.
What must be done is changing the domestic and foreign policy postures and the political structure of the country as well. It is torturing to see how a bunch of people has usurped political power, while the other strata of society have to eat humble pie. Besides, the Nazi dictatorship has intimidated people so much that they fear to have a say of protest in defense of their entitles. For example, French laboring people came out against the new labor code offered by Holland, demanding better labor conditions. To follow suit, we should stop fearing. We should be sure that in a democratic state, a citizen enjoys the right to fight for their political, civic rights, for freedom of speech, holding rallies, conducting democratic elections. Unfortunately, we are deprived of these rights. Only the loyal to the policy being conducted by the current government and tycoons have access to television. How the civic right for holding rallies is executed could be seen on March 17th, when our people at the meeting were attacked by Nazi goons. The police were not on the horizon at all. When a criminal case was eventually initiated, after I had insisted on it, the Ministry of Home Affairs didn't stir a finger to detain the Nazi militants. Neither do we have the right for democratic elections. Poroshenko is set to hit the ceiling, threatening to dissolve the parliament. So what? Even though he dissolved the parliament, other PMs with the same thinking would replace their ancestors. And the torturing policy will not change. Nothing will change for better unless two things are implemented. The first one, drastic change of the domestic and foreign policy courses. The second one is drastic change of the political system of the country. If these two steps have been taken, Ukraine stands a chance to be saved. Otherwise, Ukraine is in for degradation, dying out. That's why I strongly believe that all progressive-minded people of Ukraine must combine efforts in the struggle of saving Ukraine, people and the civilization. Only acting this way do people have the right to live.